In the vast, intricate world of Lord of the Mysteries, certain figures linger at the edge of comprehension, their presence casting a long, haunting shadow over history. Among them stands Mr. Door, Bethel Abrahams, a being lost between salvation and corruption. His very existence embodies the creeping horror of the unknown. Bethel Abrahams was not always the enigmatic entity known as Mr. Door. Once a respected and influential member of the Fourth Epoch, he became a king of angels of the Door pathway, wielding unimaginable knowledge and power. But knowledge, as we often see in Lord of the Mysteries, is a double-edged sword. The deeper one gazes into the abyss, the greater the risk of being consumed by it. For Bethel Abrahams, the abyss took the form of the mother of depravity, likely as a result of one of his advancement rituals. This corruption awoke a new identity within him, one that overwhelmed his true self and took control of his body most of the time. The mother goddess of depravity, an ancient and terrifying force of corruption, embodies the absolute loss of self. Those who come into contact with her influence do not merely fall, they are transformed, reshaped into grotesque reflections of her will. For Mr. Door, this was a fate worse than death. His mind, once sharp and brilliant, became fractured. His cries for help, which only the members of the Abraham family could hear, were distorted by the corruption within him. On the blood moon, when his true self struggled to reach out the most, the mother of depravity's influence was at its peak, ensuring his descendants would only hear madness. But why was the Door pathway uniquely vulnerable? To understand this, we must consider what the pathway represents, the link between the known and the unknown, the physical and the metaphysical. To advance along this pathway is to open oneself to the vast chaotic forces of the cosmos, forces beyond human comprehension. The Door pathway does not merely explore knowledge but crosses boundaries, and in doing so, it invites entities that should not be allowed entry. Those who walk this path risk being consumed by the very forces they seek to understand. Mr. Door's fate was not an accident, but an inevitability, a consequence of the pathway's very nature. Yet, in the midst of his descent, Mr. Door exhibited an extraordinary trait: self-sacrifice. Unlike those who sought power for domination or survival, Bethel Abraham struggled to hold on to his sense of duty. He knew that if he fully succumbed to the mother goddess of depravity's grasp, the world itself would be in peril. And so, rather than clinging to life, he chose to exile himself, sealing himself away to prevent the spread of corruption. During his apotheosis ritual, when Amon approached him, offering a final respite, an end to his suffering, he accepted, choosing a quiet sleep over an eternal struggle. If advancing along the Door pathway increases one's exposure to cosmic horrors, what then would the apotheosis ritual of this sequence entail? For a beyonder to ascend to the highest level of divinity, they must enact a ritual that embodies the essence of their pathway. For a Door pathway sequence 0, this would likely involve the ultimate crossing, a complete and irreversible merging with the unknown. Would it require stepping fully beyond the fabric of reality, abandoning human perception and identity? Would it mean allowing the very forces that corrupted Mr. Door to take root, trusting that one could retain enough of themselves to maintain control? Or would it necessitate the ultimate act of sacrifice, offering oneself as the boundary, a cosmic sentinel, ensuring that nothing unwanted enters or leaves? Whatever the case, it would not be a simple ascension, it would be a transformation, one that could leave the world with either a guardian of secrets or an uncontrollable horror. To fully understand the Door pathway, we must analyze it through its authorities and its connection to the Magician tarot card. The Magician symbolizes the meeting of the physical and spiritual worlds, as above, so below. It represents a conduit through which spiritual energy is converted into real-world action. This aligns perfectly with the Door pathway, which is not just about knowledge, but about traversing boundaries, bringing forth what should remain beyond the veil. Mr. Door's fate is a tragic inversion of the Magician's power. Instead of controlling the forces beyond reality, he was overcome by them. His struggle against the mother of depravity mirrors the Magician's eternal challenge to maintain balance between spiritual insight and earthly action. The Door pathway's authorities reflect this struggle. the power to open and close pathways, to summon and banish, and to see beyond the limits of reality. But with such knowledge comes the risk of being consumed by it. Mr. Door stands as one of the most tragic figures in Lord of the Mysteries. His story is not just one of corruption, but of resistance, of a mind struggling to remain intact as an all-consuming force seeks to unravel it. In his sacrifice, we see remnants of his former self, a ghost in the fabric of the world's history.